Hi and welcome everyone to our 63rd episode of The Little Inside. Surprisingly, my name is still Tobi, and this week I'm going to introduce you to 4 ways of letting go of suffering. So let's get started right after the intro. One of the most powerful teachings that I have received from my own teacher is 4 ways that help me deal with suffering. So basically these 4 ways are running away from suffering. That's the most popular one. That's what we all are doing constantly. Then the second one is changing suffering into happiness. That's a bit more skillful. Then the third way is waiting for suffering to end, or being patient, you can say. And the fourth one is transcending suffering. So let's have a look at them one by one. The first way, running away from suffering, is the most popular. As I just mentioned before, that's what we all constantly do. Each time when we adjust our posture, when we sit still, for example, we escape, we run away from suffering. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, we can say it's the most widely known or most widely used way to deal with suffering. It's when you have pain, you eat a painkiller. When you, when you're sick, you eat medicine. When you have a bad conversation with someone, usually try to avoid that person. We try to avoid the feeling bad. That's really that. And there's a lot of technology nowadays that allows us to escape suffering pretty well, actually. Yeah? So we're pretty good at this. We have good medical care. At least in some places in the world, there's relatively good medical care. There's relatively good health insurance. There's some kind of stability in most countries. Of course, there are a lot of problems too in the world, but we are doing relatively well globally. So if you really look at the world, then of course you can always focus on the negative. You can always focus on the positive. Now I'm focusing a little bit on the positive. You can see that, for example, in our culture, Western culture, you have a lot of good technology. Most people, they have a roof over their head. They have enough to eat so they don't have to starve. There's a lot of indicators that we're doing well on that level of escaping suffering, of creating circumstances that don't allow for too much suffering or misery to arise. So we could say that probably most people who are watching this video right now and understand me, that we are all coming from a culture where we are dealing with most of our sufferings rather efficiently. Okay, that doesn't mean that we're not suffering at all, but we have systems established that allow us to suffer, maybe not like in the Middle Ages or something like this. So we have done well in that regard. Travel is easy, healthcare is pretty good. There's enough to drink, enough to eat. And all these kind of things, right? So that's the first way. And you will recognize this first way right as you're watching this video. You're changing your body, right? Some people, they're a bit fidgety. They're kind of doing these fidgety movements with their legs, with their hands and arms. Maybe right now you're doing some of that. Maybe you can see people around you sitting in a train or on the bus. You can see that they constantly move their body, finding either balance. All of that is just trying to escape suffering, trying to escape, and we do that constantly. It's basically every second, every in-breath that you take. If you're not breathing in, then suffering comes, so you breathe in. You run away from the suffering of not breathing in. Breathing out is the same thing, blinking your eyes. The whole body works in that way. It regulates itself. It balances, harmonizes itself continuously, so there's not too much suffering. If we're out of balance, then illness is the result, right? Mostly result of great tension. The second point is to change suffering into happiness. This is kind of like you're finding a solution to the problem, right? If you have a problem with someone and there is an argument going on with them, then you can focus on how to create a solution. You can also just focus on how stupid the other person is, but you can also focus on maybe listening as a solution. So you're transforming from just I'm angry and I'm pissed off and I don't like the way you talk, I don't like the way you look, I don't like who you are, towards, okay, let me listen for the sake of finding a solution. So here you are transforming actively a state of suffering and misery and complaining into a state of listening, adjusting, and solving a problem. This is more clever, or you're not just running away, you're not just telling the other person, oh, shut up, and then you turn around and you go your own way and that's that problem solved, right? It's not really solved. You're just running away from the problem. So in the second solution, kind of we are working actively on finding a solution. Like, for example, when you are feeling some pain in your body, like you suffer from indigestion, you can just simply eat a painkiller. That's the first one. Or you can actively see, what did I eat? What is likely giving rise to such pain? And then work on a solution. Okay, I shouldn't eat that anymore. And then observe, every time you eat that, the pain comes back. So you stop eating that, you stop hurting yourself. That's actively finding a solution. You're being kind to yourself, you're doing something good to your own body. And so that's the second way. It's pretty simple, really. The third way of dealing with suffering is to wait for it to end. So sometimes there's not much you can do, right? So you can only sit there and wait for the problem to go away. Sometimes you just have to be patient. And all these methods are legit. Running away from suffering, escaping it, is a legit method. The suffering will end temporarily. Solving it, finding a solution, good. So that's legit method. There will be another suffering that comes later, but you have created some happiness in the meantime. The third point is just simply waiting. That's okay too. Sometimes there's not much you can do, right? So you just wait for the problem to end. Like, let's say you are sick and that there is nothing that you can do about being sick. Now you just have to maybe you have dengue fever or something like this and you have to suffer for a week. You take painkillers, you do what you can, but basically you just have to wait for the sickness to end. So that's okay too. That method is okay too, and we need to use it quite often in our life too. We just need to wait sometimes. You can't solve the problem right away. The only thing you can do is respond to it with kindness or other skillful mental states. The fourth method is the most profound one. It's also the most elusive one. It's pretty difficult actually to fully realize that. So the fourth method basically deals with transcending suffering. You're ending suffering. And you're not ending just one suffering, but you're going to the root. You're finding the sufferer. So there is no suffering, right, without a sufferer. If there is no suffering, if there is no sufferer, there is no suffering. It's really that simple. So the root of all the suffering that we experience, the root of the problem, lies within the actual sense of there is a me that is surrounded by a universe that is in control of the elements in this universe, at least of some of them, that owns those elements, and it needs to kind of run them to the end of its life. And this me, it wants to be happy and it doesn't want to suffer, and it creates, while it tries not to suffer and to be happy, it creates all kinds of problems, unnecessarily so. That little me, the sense that there is not just a universe with its natural elements following their natural order, but there is this little me that runs the show. And that little me is perpetually unsatisfied, and it constantly tries to be happy. And if you look at the history, human history, that's all that it is. It's a lot of little me's that try to be happy. And they get together and then form groups. They have a bigger sense of me. And then in that group, they try to be happy. And they see other people as the obstacle. These people are in the way of our happiness. Let's kill them. And then you have a war and so forth. That's the real problem. The real problem is that we do not really understand ourselves. And so thus we are not really able to let go of suffering and misery. Instead, we're constantly creating more of it in our search for an end of it. And so transcending suffering means to find spiritual fulfillment. And this means that you're going the path of meditation. You're coming to the point where you are deeply understanding the truth of life. And that's a whole nother chapter here in this little video. I'm just shortly going to give you an introduction to those 4 ways of dealing with suffering. So again, the first one, running away, escaping suffering, legit. The second one, changing suffering into happiness, very good too. The third one, waiting for suffering to end. And the fourth one, ending suffering or transcending suffering through proper realization. So I hope that this information was useful and helpful to you guys. And so now you might be able to kind of categorize a little bit more or understand, here's what I'm doing right now. Here is me being creative, changing suffering into happiness, or here is me running away from suffering. Is there something better that I could do maybe? Here's me waiting for suffering to end. Or here is me going on a spiritual path, actively working on the end of suffering, the complete end. Okay, so that's all that comes to mind for this week. I hope it was in some way helpful. If you do have any questions or comments, please write them down in the comment section below. And I'm looking forward to see all of you guys again next Wednesday. And I wish you a wonderful next week, full of happiness, release, and the end of suffering. Bye-bye.